Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on VinCon TV. On this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And this episode, by the way, is the first episode of a new season, and we are continuing our dive into Dungeons and Dragons. Now, in my past shows, I have been interviewing guests who I worked with back in the 90s, Wizards and TSR, worked on Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons. It's been a great stroll through memory lane, but for this season, we're doing something totally different. I wanted to find out, talk to the people who are working on Dungeons and Dragons right now, like who's relevant to what we're doing these days, and find the young people who are working on Dungeons and Dragons. And so we were like, well, where do we go to find these people? And Derek said, well, let's go to the DMs Guild because they would know. And so we reached out to the DM Guild. Lisa Penrose there has been great in introducing me. I've been meeting all sorts of amazing new voices in Dungeons and Dragons who are bringing fresh perspectives to this game, you know, the greatest game ever, or Magic, one of those two, of course. So let's get to it. My guest today is Celeste Conowitch. Now, Celeste hosts an actual play podcast called Venture Maidens. She's published numerous content for the DMs Guild. She has design credits with Wizards of the Coast, with Kobold Press, and others. And she's contributed to an upcoming Wizards of the Coast D&D hardback called Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is very exciting. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. Celeste, welcome to Fireside. Thanks for coming.
Oh, hi, am I here?
You're here.
Hey, from behind the curtain. Hey, everybody.
Yes, you are here. So, how are you doing today?
I am good. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to be here too. I'm excited spending some time because, like, you know, I played D&D. I started in 1978, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'm kind of stuck in a certain mode of thinking about D&D. So it's like, wow, hey, this would be a really fun thing to do, would be to try to figure out, well, what do people working on D&D nowadays think about D&D? So that's what we're going to find out. This is great.
Well, cool. I hope I can answer some, absolve some mystery for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I want to start with this is a bit biographical. So
Okay.
before jumping into deep theoretical design philosophy stuff.
Yes, the deep stuff. Yeah.
Yes, deep dive. Let's start with, who is Celeste Conowitch? I mean, where did you grow up? Where were you raised? How'd you get into Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, so I am a Navy brat. So I grew up a little bit of everywhere. I bounced around kind of all over the place. My family was constantly moving. So for me as a kid, it was pretty hard to make friends, which I think is actually one of the weird reasons I got into fantasy and to games so much, because I spent so much time reading. So my whole life, I've been a voracious reader. I've loved fantasy, pulp action novels of any kind, any sort. So I think that's probably where the seeds began. And I didn't really get into, well, actually, my story goes back pretty far in terms of getting into Dungeons and Dragons, though it was a while between getting into it and then actually playing it.
Yeah, we have an hour.
We have an hour. Let's walk down the path.
Yeah. Take us through the steps.
Yeah, so my love of D&D started a couple decades ago when basically in my family, my dad moved out. And so at this point, my mom was like, angry and gonna throw away all his stuff, and it was like, hey, Celeste, like, I have all these boxes of junk from your dad, like, go through them, see if you want anything, otherwise I'm just gonna throw everything away. So I was like, okay. So I go into the garage, and I see all these cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other, with permanent marker written on the side labeling everything, and I saw one box that was labeled D&D. And I was like, okay, what is this?
Do you even know it stood for Dungeons and Dragons?
I had no idea. No, I was like, just initials on a box. Yeah, so I opened up this box, and inside was a treasure trove of all of these advanced Dungeons and Dragons books. I mean, we're talking, there was like red box set in there, and all the complete guides and
you've at least heard of the games, the versions that I
yes. Oh no, the first game of Dungeons and Dragons I ever played was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I I didn't know there were other versions out there. I was like, and I looked at these books, and then there were also notebooks and binders where my dad had made campaign notes, because he was a dungeon master. And I found, his human ranger character sheet. And I was like, what are these treasures?
Okay, so I'm going to put you to the test. AD&D trivia here. So, well, not trivia so much as like, okay, so what was your favorite character class to play in AD&D?
Ooh, probably elf. I was always really into elf. Because I was
that's a race, not a character class there.
Oh, didn't they have? No, elf was a class.
D&D, the original D&D.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, that was D&D.
Oh, D&D.
Yeah. Oh, it was a whole mix of stuff in there. And then elf, and I've always been a wizard person. So when you're like, sleep as my only spell, thank you, with your 3 hit points or whatever it was. Even still to this day, I'm obsessed with playing wizards across many editions.
Yeah. Kindred spirits here. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what, writers like wizards? That's so weird. So that was sort of my introduction. I found this box of treasures, and there were all of these pictures of monsters and dragons and epic stories, just like the books that I loved so much. And I was like, this is a game that you can play with other humans. This is amazing. So that was, fast forward a few years when I get into high school, and I'm finally able to talk a bunch of my friends from the theater department to like play a game with me. So that was 9 girls in my high school theater department that we played every Sunday for like 8 hours, weekly. Only the way you can play D&D when you're kids and you don't have full-time jobs, right? And so I ran that campaign for a while, and
but I have a question before we leave that. So like your first time playing D&D, were you the DM, or was
I was. I was the dungeon master.
Did you understand what you were doing right from the get-go, or to kind of take not like the whole like the fundamental premise of characters having agency and being able to do whatever they want to? It took me a while to understand that. I kept trying to. I was also a DM from the get-go,
right?
Until I played in somebody else's campaign. I kept trying to play it like a war game.
Oh yeah.
I came up out of war games, and I was very confused for a long time. Like, you just do whatever the heck you want. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I definitely, before I had this campaign, with the 9 girls, and like, I definitely had tried to run a few D&D games, and I remember the first time I tried to run, it was so bad. I think a lot like you. I didn't really understand, the concept of agency. It was a very railroady sort of world that was like, I was like, oh, I'm going to make this awesome thing that's totally different from anything else. And my players were just like, what's happening? And then they ended up quitting, like, an hour or so into it. It was so frustrating. So that was kind of my first attempt and it was, I frequently say this, that I wish I could go back in time and find those people I played with the first time and run the game for them now and be like, look, I've gotten really good. I promise.
Yeah, my first campaign, I got to use air quotes, that fell apart when I accidentally killed off everybody in the party with a dragon. Just like one and like everybody's toast, and like, oh. And then everybody's like, "Oh, we don't want to do this."
Yeah, this isn't fun. It's hard when you first, try out DMing. I feel that people getting into the game now are really lucky that there are so many, streamed shows and podcasts to listen to. I would have killed to have an example of what the heck to do at that point. So so that was kind of a mess.
Oh, okay. So let's go back. Okay, so we got up to your theater group game. Yes. And about what year is this?
Okay, so that would have been about 2009.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Put things in context.
Yeah, to date myself. Yeah.
Well, to date myself too.
Yeah, so that was around 2009, and that game lasted for a couple years. And then I went to college, and fourth edition came out. In my high school group, I was playing 3.5, and so fourth edition came out in high school.
3.5, excellent edition, by the way.
Oh, 3.5 is definitely, so I played 3.5 for that game. And then when I was in college, 4E came out, and I played it a little and then went back to playing 3.5 edition for
She still
for
might be hard.
Yes, for years I played 3.5, and then moving forward in time, I started figuring out that there were podcasts that played Dungeons and Dragons. So I found the first podcast I listened to. It was called Drunks and Dragons. It's now known as Greetings Adventurers. But I listened to that, and I was like, wow, people can just play this game, to entertain people. This is amazing. And then the McElroys came out with the Adventure Zone, and I was like, wow, this is so funny and so cool. I play funny and cool D&D. Wouldn't awesome if I could listen to voices like mine playing a podcast like this. And so I, got all my gal pals on the phone, and I was like, hey, listen, let's make a podcast. And they were like, what is that?
And is this the beginning of Venture Maidens?
This was the beginning of Venture Maidens.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's go for it. I want to hear femme voices playing D&D. We need that. So we started there. None of us knew how to make a podcast, how to record anything. And keep in mind, this is like 5 years ago, everybody. So not everybody had just microphones in their house all the time and really great webcams and stuff. We started on headset mics that we could buy at Target for $15, trying to make this thing. So we had to learn how to stream, we had to learn how to record, we had to learn how to play D&D on the internet.
Were you playing 5th edition then, or were you still?
Yes, so that was when I had to learn 5th edition. Up to that point, because 5th edition had came out, and I was still running 3.5.
So you made the jump because you probably felt like you had to, in terms of making marketing to.
Yeah, I felt like because 5th edition came out, and I had friends who were like, oh wow, Celeste, this game is so much easier to play than 3.5. You should really try it. And I was like, no, I love 3.5. And they kept being like, no, you should try it. You should try it. And then when I finally looked at it, I was like, okay, I see how this game is going to be big. I see how this game is going to be able to appeal to new groups of people, and it's definitely the future of D&D. So I was like, so we need to make the podcast for 5th edition. So I learned how to play 5th edition. I learned how to make a podcast. And I learned how to stream to start Venture Maidens.
Yeah, I've been going through the same thing. I've switched to 5th edition. It was hard to leave 3rd because my name's in the credits, and it's like but now when I feel like I want to go sort of old school a little bit, if I want to go retro, I find myself going clear back to AD&D, because there's if I'm going to go back, why don't we go all the way
back?
And so yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I still don't have friends who will play AD&D with me, but maybe one day we'll do it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm still not quite sure how Surprise Rules work in AD&D. It's funny. I like to tease Luke Gygax. I see him online once in a while. And what was your dad thinking when he wrote?
Buddy.
Okay, so since you brought up Venture Maidens, and it must be your longest running venture as a professional in right? So tell us a little bit more about Adventure Maidens. I mean, what is the theme of is it a homebrew setting? Is it what type of wackiness happens in this? series.
Yeah. So I will say it is a little confusing. It's venture instead of adventure. So with a V for Venture Maidens. But Venture Maidens, so right before I started Venture Maidens, one of the reasons I reached out to the people in particular who are now my cast members is because just before that, we had all been part of a 5-year campaign that was 3.5 that we all played together because we all used to live in San Francisco in the same place. And sort of right before Venture Maidens started, we all had to move our separate ways, jobs and life. So we all moved apart, and we ended that campaign. So that was really sad, and so a big impetus also to start learning how to play D&D online and to make this show was so I could keep playing with those same people. So Venture Maidens is actually set in the same world as that 3.5 game was. It's basically, the continent we're playing in is the continent that was over the mountains,
Right.
from that last setting.
But
So
this
a
is
lot.
a homebrew world.
This was a homebrew world, so that I had dreamed up for this 3.5 campaign. So I already had a ton of these notes and, 5 years kind of playing in this universe. So I felt that this world was like, I was like, great, it's developed, we're ready to go, awesome. I had my 3 pages of like lined notes, and here we go. Yeah, because honestly, when we started Venture Maidens, I had no idea about the online community that surrounded Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know that people were out there writing their own content. I didn't know anything other than, the D&D books that I could see in my bookstore. So I really didn't know the breadth of like campaign settings that were available. I had like my Dark Sun books, from AD&D. I was like, but people can't play that in 5th
Pretty
edition,
good.
like it's
You're gonna have one published campaign setting on your shelf. That's not a bad one.
Oh no, yeah, I've got it. I've got Hollow World sitting over there too that I'm constantly dreaming about how can I bring into 5th edition. It's Spelljammer, and just I other than I was like, no, people aren't doing this, or are they? I don't really know. So I really only made and played homebrew before I got involved in the community, and before I started learning like, oh my gosh, DMs Guild people are writing amazing campaign settings, and like there are so many tools and options to pick from. So I was pretty exclusively homebrew for like 10 years of DMing.
Celeste, I was the same way. I started my doing homebrew campaign of Chaldea, which I'm turning into a property soon, back in 1978, and I've been GMing it ever since. And so, like, there is a certain. Have you ever felt a certain disconnect with other players or GMs who have? I always felt some of that because a lot of the old school gamers talk about, well, I went to the Giant series or the Slaver series or the Drow series. Like, I never did. I never went through any of those. I just did my own thing the whole time.
Yeah, so something I will say about being a new designer, and I think playing with a new generation of players, is a lot of that I think has gone away, because most players, they've heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but they may not know what Forgotten Realms means. Most of the time, most people ask who have started just playing Dungeons and Dragons, they have no idea who Dristo Erden is. It's a whole new ball game in terms of people are walking totally fresh into things. So they don't identify D&D as strongly as being from these settings that have so much history behind them.
Yeah, there's so much. All right, so take us to, because you've published now. I mean, you've published or helped in or co-authored or authored a number of RPG products now. So what was your branch into the world of being a published D&D designer?
Yeah. So I mean, when I first got these books, when I started reading, these old treasures that I found in a box in the garage, I knew then, and I was like 10, 12 years old at that time. I was like, I want to write these books. Like, I want to make these games. And when I started Venture Maidens, that was my first, step into like, oh, how do I make a product for other people? How do I plug into the world of making something for Dungeons and Dragons? You know, it wasn't writing, but it was a podcast, it was a show. And I was like, awesome, great. And that really opened up so many doors all of a sudden, because I got to start meeting people who made things for Dungeons and Dragons. I got to meet
Right.
other podcasters, other people who were streaming their shows, which led me to meet the people who were writing D&D. And it, you know, it just sort of like, as I got to see these people and meet these people, I realized this was possible. So I think when I started Venture Maidens, I knew that the end goal here was to make games and play games for a living all the time. That's all I've ever really wanted to do. I don't like
I
anything in
hear
the
you.
world so much as I like games. There's nothing in the world that makes me happier than, you know, rolling dice with my friends. And I was like, how do I make this a job? How do I make this my life? So it was actually just almost a year ago, around this time, that I finally made the jump into full-time freelancing. I felt that I had made enough connections and I had started working on lots of other like little projects.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I know people here, and I feel great about my connections, and you know, the people I've met along the way, that I can do this. So I saved up enough money that I would have 6 months to try and do freelancing, you know, and if I made $0, I had the savings account like for 6 months.
Right.
And it kept working. I kept getting jobs. I got invited onto products.
So tell me what the first one. I mean, what was your first break, or like what was an early moment here?
Yeah, I think one of the very first projects I got invited on was Jeff Stevens, who is a really great writer on the DMs Guild. I think, you know, he had worked with my friend Hannah Rose, who's like an amazing editor for Wizards of the Coast and everything. He had worked with her, and you know, Hannah said, hey, oh, Celeste is trying to get on some projects and whatever. And Jeff reached out and was like, bam, hey, like, I want to pay you. Let's write something. Let's do this. And I was like, Jeff, I don't like, you know, and he's like, no, you got this. And so I wrote, you know, a monster for him. And, you know, it kind of took off from there. And I was like, wow, I handed it off. And he's like, this is great. Have some money. And I was like, this is real now.
So can you tell us about the monster, or is it like some?
Yeah, so it was part of a Villains and Lairs compendium. Yeah, so it was a really weird monster. It was something called the Doctor, which is technically an undead, but it crashed to Earth in a strange ship. It was very Spelljammery, because you know,
Yeah,
it's awesome. Unapologetically saying Spelljammer is awesome. So it had crashed to Earth, and basically its whole thing was the way it stayed alive was by dissecting other organisms and incorporating their own body parts into his to live forever.
Well, that's clever.
You know. Yeah, that was, I'm sure that must have not been my first design, but it was definitely one of them. It was just, you know, it's amazing. Like when I started telling people, hey, I want this so bad, that people were, you know, started to knock on my door, because I was knocking on theirs, and I was, you know, putting the word out and just telling people everywhere on every platform I could that I wanted this so bad. And
You know,
that's how it started.
Celeste, I'm glad you point that out. It's such an important piece of it.
Oh yeah.
Starting a career is to go out and tell people, hey, this is what I want to do.
I want to do this. I want to write for you.
Yeah, help me out. Help me find places. Get allies.
I'm really grateful that my degree that I got in college is in theater. So I have been trained to sell my work under the worst circumstances in the world, which I feel really prepared me well for, you know, going into freelance writing. You know, because every interaction is an audition, right? But you know, getting out there and just, you know, when people see how much you want it, and you show up and you do the work to prove how much you want it.
So much of almost any job is salesmanship, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah. Hey, by the way, you mentioned Hannah Rose, and Hannah Rose is going to be on our show in 2 weeks. She's
Oh
going
my
to be my guest.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, Hannah, Hannah and I just released a product together, too. So I love that, we getting to know Hannah, because I moved to Seattle right when I was going to start freelancing too. I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to freelance. I'm going to go to Seattle because I hear a lot of wizards live in Seattle.
Mhm.
And I got to meet Hannah, and so that has been just an amazing friendship, and I love working with Hannah.
So can you tell us about this project you worked on with Hannah?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this
So
will be great, because then I'll get to ask her about it and see if the stories jive.
link up. Definitely. Oh, it's a test. Yeah. So we just released a product called Dino World,
Okay.
which
Well, yes, I was going to ask you about Dino World. So good. Let's make this that conversation.
Yeah, so Dino World is it's part of it's Adventurers League legal, and part of the Eberron Salvage Bases and Missions series, which, if you haven't checked it out, it's a really cool kind of alternate way to play AL, because you're collecting basically junk, and then you can use it to build a base. And each game you play, you can accumulate more junk and build up your base, and you get cool stuff like, guards and machines and stuff to fill your heroic base. So
Oh my gosh, Celeste, you know what that reminds me of?
What?
Original D&D. Like even
Yeah,
before,
building your base.
no, even before AD&D,
Mhm.
original D&D, when they were playing, we just grew out of chainmail and playing war games. It was all about having your keep, and hiring soldiers, and
Yeah.
collecting and running your barony, and that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm one of the DMs Guild Adepts, which is an awesome program that basically lets, we sort of address needs that the community has in terms of like extra products to go along with Wizards of the Coast publications. So we were asked by Sean Merwin, who an amazing person, runs kind of the Eberron AL scene, if we could make some more of these salvage missions. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, what can I do in Eberron? What's cool about Eberron? Oh man, they have a lot of dinosaurs in Eberron. Oh my gosh, it's really cool, Jurassic Park. What if we can just put that in Eberron? So,
I was going to ask you if Dino World had a Jurassic, because it seemed to me like, browsing through it, it seemed to me like there was a bit of a nod to Jurassic Park.
a bit. Yeah, just a bit. Oh, the villain's name is Nedry? Whoa, what? Yes, it's definitely, and I figured too, the world is in a lot of chaos right now. So giving people just a fun adventure where they get to, fight some dinosaurs, felt like
Right.
really, really good timing.
But what is what I didn't see was like, what is the premise for why the dinosaurs are there?
Okay, so the adventure is actually set in the Mournland. So in Eberron, the Mournland is basically this area that was destroyed, sort of in a mysterious magical tragedy. So basically, all the people in this certain area of Eberron died, but all of the cities and structures and everything are still left. So sometimes adventurers will travel into the Mournland to, raid these places or to take resources from the Mournland, though it is extremely dangerous because, the creatures who do remain alive there are mutated or weird, and just lots of weird stuff happens in the Mournland. So basically the premise is, you have to go into the Mournland. You're sent by a sheriff to go find this person. It's rumored she's at this abandoned theme park, because there was this town called Seaside in the Mournland that was all about, a vacation town, like relaxing, had carnivals and parks. And so I figured, hey, why wouldn't there be a theme park all about dinosaurs there? Because they love dinosaurs in Eberron. So so yeah, they have to find this woman who's hidden amongst the ruins of this dinosaur theme park. So
Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, okay. So what should we talk about next that you've worked on? Should we? I feel like we should go to Icewind Dale.
If you want, yeah. I just got my copy in the mail. I'll hold this up because I haven't gotten to show anybody today.
I
No,
did.
it's not. It's almost out, but I got a special early copy because I helped write it. But look at
Oh,
it.
nice.
Look at it. So many secrets.
Ah,
Yeah. So oof. Yeah, holding this, by the way, and opening it up and seeing my name in a D&D book. I don't know if you had this experience when you first wrote a D&D book, but I just cried. I just cried and held this book like
oh
a
yeah.
little baby.
Well, the first product that we made at Wizards of the Coast was not Magic the Gathering. It was an RPG line, and the first one was a book that I wrote with a lot of help. There was a big cast of us called the Primal Order, and it was about playing deities, and it was basically
So
about power
cool.
gaming.
Yeah. You know what? Power gaming's fun. It's what it is.
In my old circle of D&D, we viewed the deities and demigods book as basically a monster manual book.
Whoa! Oh my gosh, y'all were intense.
Oh my God, we were very high level place. So so the first book we call it, So I remember that moment of holding the first book that I wrote and
It's
published, and I didn't get into an official D&D book until third edition D&D. So that was pretty cool too. Yeah.
third edition's a good one. So
So yes. So tell us about Rime of the Frost Maiden.
yeah, I mean, getting to work on this was, I mean, it's everything I've been dreaming about since I was 12, writing a Dungeons and Dragons book. So I remember the day, I got an email from Chris Perkins and I thought I was wrong. I looked at it, I was like, this can't what? Like, I had a friend actually look at the email tag and they're like, yeah, that's from Chris Perkins. I was like, I don't understand what's happening right now. I kind of just laid on the floor for a while. And he's like, what is this? Would you be interested in working on this book? I was like, yeah, yes, yes, please. Sure. Yes. How many more times can I say yes without freaking you out? Um, so getting to work on that was amazing. And then I was also really lucky. All of the co-authors who wrote this book they were all just wonderful people, and we're all so close after the experience too. So I mean, we still have a group chat. We named ourselves the Valkyries,
Nice.
all the writers of this book. So the whole time we were writing, we were sharing our details and drafts and kind of supporting each other through the, oh my God, we're writing for Wizards of the Coast um,
Right.
day-to-day stresses.
Nice. That's fun.
Yes.
So tell us about the book. What is this book about?
Yeah. So for those of you who might be familiar with the Crystal Shard series from R.A. Salvatore, or for those of you who aren't, I'll go into it. So in these books, the location that was explored in by Salvatore was Icewind Dale, which is this remote part of the Sword Coast. It's sealed in by mountains, it's buffeted by blizzards, just this horrific climate, Arctic climate to be in. So the book takes place in this location. And yet still, even though the conditions are terrible, there are people who live in Icewind Dale. They occupy these places called 10 towns, and these are some of the hardiest, cussiest, pig-headed people in the world. They're tough as nails, I think is a better way to say it. So this book really looks at this climate in particular, this dangerous, deadly climate, which has been made worse by a minor goddess called Oriel, who is the goddess of winter's fury. And basically, after she was chased by the rest of the gods out of sort of the main focus, she kind of took refuge in Icewind Dale and is now there and has cast an eternal spell of winter over Icewind Dale. So the already harsh, dark, brooding climate is now cast into perpetual night by this spell she weaves, across the Dale day in, day out. So it is an extremely dark setting in a lot of ways, and that's something you can actually see visually in the book. It's like all the art is oh God, it's just they did such a gorgeous job, like with the
Oh, I
darkness
bet.
and
Yeah.
yeah, the and a big thing for all of us writers too is some folks have mentioned in the chat there that Chris Perkins has talked about like The Thing being a huge inspiration for this, which is one of the best horror movies ever made in my opinion. And citing things like The Mountains of Madness from Lovecraft. So
Oh,
in this book, it's a lot of psychological thrills and horrors that you have to confront while you are trying to save Icewind Dale from this spell.
oh, okay. That's fantastic. And did you get a chance to talk with Bob Salvatore?
I didn't. I have thought
Process?
about emailing him several times, just be like, "Hi, uh, but it was fun. The minute I heard I was on this project, I went back and because it had been years since I read, the Crystal
Right.
Shard and
Sure.
everything. So I actually downloaded them all as audiobooks. So I was listening, Victor Bavine just read me all of the Icewind Dale books over and over again. Oh gosh. Yeah. And it's an incredible setting that, you say Icewind Dale and people know so much. And the people who don't know are in for such a treat to explore a setting that I really feel like hasn't been brought up yet at all in 5th edition, an icy,
Yeah.
horrible, dark, natural disaster waiting to happen setting.
That's great. Well, hey, by the way, Bob Salvatore was just on Fireside. He was, I think, the next to last guest I had before you, in the prior season. It was
Whoa.
great.
So
Yeah.
maybe if I CC you and I'm like, hey, he's on the door. I just wanted to say, hey, I liked your books.
He's a great guy. He's, he's a very kind of brash guy in a way, but in a good way, good-hearted, but kind of, he used to work as a bouncer. I'll say that.
Okay. All right.
When he was young.
He's
So,
just very Dwarven,
yeah.
it's all up front.
Yes. Right.
Oh, somebody said he's Bruner. Yeah, you got me off a stream. He's Bruner Battlehammer for sure, in your face.
Okay. Secrets of Zimtaran.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. So that was another DMs Guild project that I got to be involved in. And this was an incredible. I just got to work with so many great people. The DMs Guild is just bursting with talent every time you turn around. And
I hope so. We just committed a whole season.
yeah, no,
So,
hey, DMs Guild, you're amazing. You're full of amazing people. So
I'm sure you're right. We figured that out real quick. We were like,
oh yeah.
this is really good.
Oh yeah. So I got to work with, folks like Justice Armand, who is an incredible designer who does a lot of stuff with Beetle and Grimm. So I got to work with him really closely on this project to design some subclasses for this. And I was thrilled because this was finally my chance to incorporate some of my favorite 3.5 classes.
Right.
So I got to make the Spell Thief and I got to make the Beguiler, which are two of my favorite classes from 3.5. So I was thrilled to be involved and bring those to life.
Right. So what what's your forte in writing? Like what do you think of all, you've had to have done world stuff and mechanic. You just talked about something that sounds very mechanics oriented. You've contributed, you've done monsters, you GM, so you do everything. But where do you think, as a writer, a game designer for D&D, is your strongest suit?
Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure that out because I was like, all right, I'm walking into this freelancing thing, and so my plan was to divide and diversify so I could be as useful as possible in any situation because
Okay.
jobs are hard to get. So I was like, cool, so I need to be able to write monsters, I need to be able to make spells, I need to be able to write adventures, whatever people need. I tried to take on a bunch of different products or projects kind of across the board that would give me experience with all those things. So I have been really lucky to work on all kinds of stuff. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly my favorite thing to do is because, for the first time, I get to kind of sit and feel comfortable, like, okay, I have some jobs now, like, maybe I can pick. So I actually don't really know quite yet what my
Well,
specialty
Celeste,
might
I think that's
be.
very clever of you to not allow yourself to be, I'm not falling for that, Peter. I'm not gonna say no. I don't want to be
No,
known as the monster lady, right?
no, I am
Oh,
absolutely. I'm that annoying person in emails. When people are like, "Oh, what would you consider your specialty?" When I'm coming onto a project, I'm like, anything," and I
I'm not
link a
falling for that.
product across. I'm like, "Oh, you want to see my monsters in Kobold Press? You want to see my book of magic items on the DMs Guild? You want to see my adventure? What do you?" You got to be that snake oil salesman, right? What do you
There you
want?
go.
I got it all.
So obviously you think about adventures a lot because you've been running a podcast of adventures for 5 years, I think is what you said. And you ran a D&D 3.0, 3.5 campaign before that. And you're writing adventure stuff. So when you start to write an adventure, like how do you approach it? Like, okay, these characters, like, do you think about it from what the characters' goals are first, or what the setting is, or maybe a villain and what they're doing? Like, how do you try and structure your mind around the task of sending characters out of the world?
Yeah, starting. That's always the hardest part.
Well, that's
Usually,
why I asked you about
yeah, I know.
it. I need
You
some
want
help
you
here.
want the answer. No.
Yeah.
So usually what I do whenever I'm sitting down to make a new adventure, I ask, what do I think people need from this adventure?
You mean the characters or players?
No, people who are going to play this book. Because there is so much content out there that it's like, what can I bring that's different, or what can I bring that's new, or that fills a place that hasn't yet been addressed in 5th edition. So like one of the reasons I did Dino World was because I felt like people needed a pulp action dinosaur adventure. I feel like that wasn't something that was open to people before. And I was like, you know what, this would be a great adventure to get people who've never played D&D before to play. Because if they like Jurassic Park, and who doesn't,
Right.
this is a great way to convince players to jump in and play D&D, because you know what, it's Jurassic Park. So I try to think about that in terms of adventure. So like, what is a cool mechanic going to be, or what is a cool scenario that's going to be different and compelling. And once I have that idea in my mind, then that sort of leads me to the question of, okay, it hasn't been done, so how do we build it? How do you build the thing that's new? And then how do you build the structures to support the thing that's new so it doesn't feel jarring? And then by that time, you've gone over your word count and you're freaking out. And you have an adventure. So
it's almost like start with the hashtags.
yeah, so it starts with the
hashtags, dinosaur hunting,
dinosaur, D&D. And I will definitely say, I think something that is sets Venture Maidens maybe apart from other podcasts is it's very NPC focused. I really delight in making NPCs that are complex and storied, and that can drive adventures. So that comes across, I think, a lot in my adventure writing. Usually it revolves around a couple NPCs, a couple power players who have set up this, this disaster, or this scenario, or this problem that needs to be fixed.
Right. Well, that's great. That's funny. Oh, all right. So I remember when I first was introduced to you by Lisa, she mentioned something about hair.
Yes.
And that you published, or you were working on a project having to do with hair. And I was like literally hair, or is this
literally
a code word, or is this? And she typed it in all caps. So I thought maybe it's an acronym. Halflings as
Oh no, it's hair.
It's hair. Okay. So what is the hair story here?
So in my quest this year to try and diversify and do everything, I made a list of things that I was scared of and like should learn how to do so I won't be scared of them. And one of those things was running a Kickstarter.
Okay.
Because I knew that, you know, people can kickstart RPG books and settings and they make a great deal of money. You know, I was looking at people like Sly Flourish who just like kickstarts everything and does so well. And I'm like, okay, so I need to do a Kickstarter. And my friend,
I gotta say, so Derek's asking in chat, did we cover a hair Kickstarter? Did we cover your Kickstarter? Maybe. Did you do it? So you did it?
the hair Kickstarter that
Yeah.
we covered. I don't know. I've definitely talked about it before when it happened.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Ignore me. Ignore the.
Oh, okay. I think someone's saying, I think we did. Well, yeah, but basically I was like, okay, I need to do a Kickstarter. And my friend Neil Powell, who's my co-host on the DM Nastics podcast that I do, he was like, hey, I have this idea. What if we had like a supplement for Dungeons and Dragons that was all about hair? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like magic, like hair magic and monsters. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. So we worked together to write this supplement that's all about bringing hair into your Dungeons and Dragons game. So these are monsters that are themed around hair, magic items that are themed around hair, all subclasses for each class that are based around hair, everything from like, you know, Medusa based things to like spells like hairball, you know, and like mustache copter was a spell I made. Your face, you know, you grow a mustache and it like spins around like a helicopter.
Oh, okay. And then
you know,
it lifts you up and you go flying.
lifts you up. So,
yeah.
you know, it's somewhere between like a levitate and a fly. And, you know, at the end of the duration, the mustache rips off your face and flies into the sun. So you do have to take a point of damage from that. But so
you can't cast the spell again until enough hair grows out.
Ow, until your upper lip stops hurting. Yeah, so we kickstarted that project and it funded. So we've actually been, that's in layout right now. So next month, it will be available on Drive-Thru RPG to not just the folks who backed the project. So if you want to get goofy, you should get this. You should get the ultimate guide to hair.
I got to, because I got to figure out my own campaign that I'm running that my wife's in. Mm-hmm. She's a priestess of a Norse goddess, but she ended up in a Greek thing anyway. And she went to Aphrodite's pool, and she swam in Aphrodite's pool. And so well, you have a +2 charisma now, just forever, just. And I didn't want to just say +2 charisma. I wanted to be why. And I said, you have the best hair. Anybody, I mean, like people go down like, wow, what great hair.
Wow.
Okay, so
yes.
yeah. So now I got to take that to the next level. I got to get your, is it just called hair? Is that what it's called?
The Ultimate Guide to Hair. I think Lil Louie in chat, thank you so much for posting that link. Yeah, so the Ultimate Guide to Hair, you can order a copy now on BackerKit if you want to get in there. I made some really good magic items, not to toot my own horn for this, but my favorite is
go ahead and shoot, please.
prismatic hairspray. So it's a can that, you know, you can set the prismatic effects. So it gives you sort of a prismatic spray effect when you spray the can. It's good stuff.
Oh, I got to the pre-order now button. So we're done.
Good.
We're done.
I will one copy today.
I'll click on that. And I got to get that. My wife would be so excited.
Oh, so fun. Yes. Yes.
So what would be an example of a subclass built around hair? Like what?
Sure.
Like,
so I built, I made a paladin for that called, they belong to the Oath of the Aesthetic, which is all about making yourself as gorgeous as possible, to be an example, to inspire other people to become the most beautiful and gorgeous versions of their self. So I know for their turn ability, I gave them turn the unsightly, so they can turn any creatures like with under a certain charisma score just away from them because they don't want to look at them. So that was one example.
That kind of plays off of the old, you know, in AD&D, you had to have a charisma of 17 to be able to do it, right?
Exactly. So it's going all back to paladins being, the shiny good, the shiny good ones.
Nice nod back to the OGs.
So yeah, oath of the aesthetic. And we did some deities in there too. So I did, of course, Adonis. So the god of beauty is included in that, and lots of fun gems in there.
Right. So can you tell us about anything that hasn't come out yet, or it's on the?
I think I'm under NDAs for everything else.
Don't worry about that. You're okay here. You can give away spoilers. You can talk about anything here.
I am really excited. I wrote a bunch of monsters for the Kobold Press Tome of Beasts 2 that's coming out. I got to write a lot of really fun monsters in there, so I'm very excited to get that book in my hands. So that'll be a good time.
Nice. Yeah, I love the Kobold Press people. Those are good. Yeah, Wolfgang.
Oh yeah. No, and Kobold Press is amazing, and Wolfgang is so kind. Wolfgang and Megan, who does a ton of their editing. I've been really lucky to work with them on a bunch of stuff too, and they let me do an archdevil for this book, and that was I actually did 2. So really good stuff. I can't wait. Megan sent me some of the preview art the other day, and I freaked out. It was so good.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier DMnastics. What is DMnastics? I saw the logo on your site, and they showed like guy and a gal
lifting. Yeah.
And of course, I immediately flinched.
Oh, gym. Yes. I also is like, but it's just a gym metaphor. So DMnastics is.
Okay.
So the tagline for that show is the gym for dungeon masters to work out their minds. So it's a podcast that I do with the Block Party Network, and basically what we do is that we have forum boards where we post like DM challenges. So it's like, how to incorporate this in your world, or like how does the story of your map influence the game. And so there are lots of like challenges and exercises. So each episode we talk about one of those challenges, we highlight posts from folks who did a great job, and then we do the exercises as well. So it's really just us like making content for people to steal for their games, and we totally encourage that. Like us, we are always riffing ideas, new NPCs, cool ideas. So it's sort of like that live mental exercise.
Right. Oh, that's cool. That's great. So this is a podcast, right? That's what you said. All right. Yeah. Cool. That's fantastic. So wow, this is good. How do you? So you're 1 year into the freelancing. Then,
1 year.
Right?
Yep. I think I'm technically 11 months now. So very soon I'm coming up on my 1 year.
And you feel like it's going well? You're gonna be able to make this your dream that you wanted, of being able to do this for a living? It's working?
Yeah, I am living my absolute dream life right now. And this is something I say too, like to preface this as well, like because I think there are a lot of people out there who want to make games for a living, and that is like the dream. And gosh, it's hard. It's been a long climb to get here. It's been a lot of, it still is, a lot of stressful nights, making these deadlines work, because you have to do so many projects to make it work. You do have to be marketable in everything to make it work. And I feel really good that I'm finally kind of, I think, through the thick of it. Because there was definitely, those points in the 6-7 months where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how to work for myself full time, and where my limits were and what that was. And you have to break a little bit before you can, repair and be stronger. But I think I've made it through that. And, that I was worried about that too, because I was warned so many times, freelancing is hard to do full time. And I'm really glad I had those people who let me know, so I could, steel myself for that. But I think I've made it through, and I'm here on the other side, and my name is, in this book. And I'm here to stay. I'm going to be writing this game for a very long time. And
well, the great thing is we're both young. We, we'll
Yeah,
stay in touch, and
we got a lot of stuff to do.
yeah. So hey, we're getting up towards the end. We have a few minutes left. Is there anything I missed that you would have wished I would have asked, or something you would
No,
have?
you did your homework. I was so fun getting to talk about all my projects. Thank you everybody so much for listening to me talk about myself for so long.
Well, I think that's yeah. So okay, well I'm gonna go into kind of my final question for you. Like
Mm.
so because this season is about new voices in Dungeons and Dragons. So what, as a new voice in Dungeons and Dragons and your peers in the DMs Guild, what do you think that you're bringing that's new to the table? And I'm trying to get away from, well, it's fifth edition. We need all,
Yeah,
like
of course.
independent of edition. What is it that you think yourself and other new voices of D&D are bringing to the community?
Yeah, so what I think it's a really exciting time to be writing Dungeons and Dragons, particularly because the game is more popular than ever. We are having people you never thought would be interested in role playing games, try these games out. And now that, people on the internet can play, Dungeons and Dragons is more accessible than it's ever been before. So when you're designing for Dungeons and Dragons, the scope that of people you're writing this game for, the scope of people you're writing these adventures for has broadened significantly. Because when Dungeons and Dragons was first coming out, it was also sort of in the middle of defining what the fantasy genre was as well. Pulp fantasy was being defined along with role-playing games. So there were strong, tropes that were being set up. There were strong narratives, the patterns that we see in all those things that we recognize as fantasy. So now that so many more people are coming into the genre and coming into the game, we're sort of at a point where we can redefine what fantasy was. We have all these building blocks that were set up for this genre, but now, those building blocks, some of them work, but some of them don't. We have to open up the stories to make fantasy and make this game work for players who have been playing for 40 years and for people who just found out what it was. So we can put these heroes that look different, that feel different. We can change the perspective of what's going on, and reignite, I guess, and redefine, reforge fantasy, as it were, into a wider array of treasures than what we had before. So I think new voices now, they're getting to look at what that is. So making fantasy, opening it up and opening up through this game.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's great. Reforging fantasy.
Yeah, because it's
What?
there's always going to be the themes of like working together with your friends, of magic, coming up against dangers. Those things are integral to fantasy, and they're not going anywhere. But how can we use those and put the heroes in the story to be those who many people relate to? So it's building on a foundation to make it broader and wider in scope.
I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. Hey, before one more, I'm going to squeeze in one more question before we go. Derek brought up in chat here. I think it's a good one. Can you tell us a little bit more about the DMs Guild and like what?
Yeah, so the DMs Guild is an amazing program which basically lets people use the license of Dungeons and Dragons in some capacity to write their own content that other people can buy, that they can download, that they can play. So, I mean, the DMs Guild is definitely the best way if you are looking to start designing or getting, into a community and like play testing your work and learning how that all works. The DMs Guild is your go-to place to get in there, to see what other people are writing, and then to try your hand at publishing an adventure or, a subclass that you've been thinking about for a long time. It's an amazing space and an amazing community that has a lot of resources for new folks to learn how to write adventures, to learn how to lay out adventures. They've got art on there, so many tools to help you get started. So DMs Guild is just absolutely phenomenal.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, that's fantastic. I've certainly enjoyed getting to know Lisa a little bit, who connected us, and you've been an outstanding guest. What a
Thank you.
what a delight to sit and talk to
This
you.
was a delight. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely, and I hope you know I wish you nothing but the best of success. And like I said, we're both young, and so we'll be around. I'm sure we're going to see each other, run into each other. Maybe we'll get a chance to game together someday.
Maybe a Gen Con will be back up. Maybe I can say hi when that starts
Yes,
happening again.
yes. What it will once we will once again
Mhm.
reunite in person
It's
in
my favorite con, so it's got to.
You get a gold star for mentioning Gen Con. Yes, thank you. So yeah, so all right. Well, this wraps up another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison here on Gen Con TV. Yes, we are back, and we will be here next week on a regular basis now, week in, week out. My guest next week on September 9th will be Joshua Mendenhall. Now, he was the lead designer of Islands of Sinauna. I said that right. Check this out, a 5th edition D&D supplement on pre-colonial Philippine mythology. Wow, I guarantee that's going to be like nothing you've ever seen before. So that is a week away. Don't worry, we have lots of other programming here on Gen Con TV to keep you entertained between now and then. On Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific time is Table Takes. That is where Hair was, the Hair Kickstarter was covered. Yes, so go to Table Takes, find out other stuff that's happening in the industry now. On Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll have Board Games with Brothers Murph. And then again on Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, we will have Board Games with This Game Gets Dicey. And then at 4 o'clock, back to Fireside with me. And if you miss any of our shows, you can find all of our streams about a day or so later on Gen Con Video, the YouTube channel, and also including all the episodes that we filmed searching for untold stories behind Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. Also, our episodes are available in podcast form. Please remember to follow, subscribe, turn on notifications, tell your friends, and so thank you once again, Celeste Conowitch, for being our guest, and thanks also to our studio manager, Marcus Mays, our producer, Derek Guter, to Gen Con TV for hosting us, and most of all, thank you for watching.